What's good, people? I want to show face and speak about the Game Awards because I stayed up until 4 a.m. last night, or this morning technically, to watch the Game Awards, which, to be honest, I don't think I've watched the Game Awards in full for a couple of years now. But for some reason, I decided to watch it this time. I was awake at half past midnight when it started in the UK time. And I started watching it, and they started offloading banger after banger with these announcements. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna stay up and watch the whole thing. And I'm glad that I did. And I want to just quickly say that before I get into it. In fact, before I get into it, if you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm your host, Terrelle. Please subscribe and hit the like button if you enjoy this video so you don't miss any future content. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you for returning. Let's get into it. My expectations going into this Game Awards were quite tempered because I like to have tempered expectations in general nowadays because you get let down quite easily. And the way that the video game industry has gone this generation in particular, especially with Sony, is they're much more reserved in terms of speaking about upcoming games until the point in time in which it's like 6 months to a year to release it. So I wasn't expecting much from this Game Awards, but at the same time, there were some rumors from Bloomberg's Jeff Schreier and other place, Jason Schreier, sorry, or was it Jeff or Jason? I can't remember. Mr. Schreier from Bloomberg, for example, who was saying there's going to be a couple bombshell announcements at the Game Awards, which even when I heard that, I was like, I'm going to temper my expectations and not to think too highly. I wrote a tweet yesterday giving some predictions of what I would have wanted to have seen and what I think that some of those hints may have alluded to. One of the things I said I would have wanted to have seen or would partially expect is a Naughty Dog's next title to be revealed. I wanted to see Resident Evil 9. I wanted to see BioShock 4. I wanted to see Judas. There was a bunch of games that I listed that I wanted to see from Software's next game. And some of that list wasn't present. And I expected that to be the case. So what we didn't get was BioShock 4. And what we didn't get was Judas, which was a shame because I'm assuming Judas should be out next year. And I'm a big fan of BioShock and Ken Levine's work, and I wanted to see what he was going to do. And then I also wanted to see the direction that the franchise was going to take without him with BioShock 4. Those weren't present, but we did get some things that I didn't expect to see that I was very happy with. And before I go into the details, because I've got a little list on my phone here of the games I want to mention, I just want to say that overall, this year is the best game awards that I can remember. And I'm pretty certain it is the best game awards that we've done in the past 10 years since Jeff Keighley has been taken over, since it was the Spike Video Game Awards. And one of the key reasons for that is Jeff this year revived that classic E3 feeling. This was a video game award ceremony, but it actually had me feeling like some of the best years of E3, where you'd be watching those conferences and just salivating at all the announcements that are coming your way. And I got to give credit where credit is due. You know, he slipped up in recent years, and I think that's why I stopped paying attention as much with his presentations at the Game Awards. But this year, I think Jeff Keighley did a great job with what he decided to present. But not only that, and one of the reasons why that's so exciting is because the year 2025 and beyond looks very promising for the video game industry after such a slow start this generation, where we were getting kind of spoon-fed or drip-fed what games are coming on the horizon. It's nice to see like a nice presentation and of announcements to give us the next couple years, a scope of what the next couple years are going to be like. Because prior to this show, we were kind of in the dark about what was really coming out next year and beyond. But now we've got a good insight into that. But another reason why this award show deserves a lot of praise is because at the end of the day, it is an awards show. Now, there were countless games that are announced that I'm excited for, but in terms of the awards show aspect of it, I thought the awards actually ended up in worthy hands, which is another bonus. Astro World won Game of the Year. Now, I actually haven't played that yet myself, so I can't really comment on that. But in terms of some of the other awards, such as Metaphor getting Best RPG, Final Fantasy getting Best Soundtrack, you know, and some of the other awards that went out, I think it was actually evenly split in a fair manner to the worthy winners. So I can't negatively critique that aspect. So all round, I thought it was a great show. Now let me talk about some of these announcements. Now, the show did start off with an announcement of a new Ninja Gaiden game, which looked really cool, and that's being made by the team that worked on Blasphemous, which is a very good Metroidvania game. So that was a good little start there. That was all in the pre-show, but once you got to and I'm going to talk about these games out of the order in which they were announced because I can't remember the specific order. But one of the first major announcements, the first major exclusive premiere that was shown was for The Witcher 4. Now, I'm not the biggest Witcher fan in the world. I never even beat The Witcher 3. But I do vividly remember the release of The Witcher 3 because I worked in game at the time and I was there on release day for that. And I remember people buying the collector's editions of it. I remember myself buying the strategy guide, I believe. But truth be told, I couldn't fully get into the game as much as I wanted to, so I never ended up beating it. And I think that's a game that I'll eventually go back to with its PS5 upgrade in the future at some point. But this Witcher 4 game looked very, very good. I know that the female protagonist is taking center stage now as the main character, but the visuals and the setup and the storytelling that was going on in the cinematic itself, which I believe was in game, running on the in-game engine, was very impressive. I wouldn't expect that game to release until late 2026, maybe 2027. So I think it's still quite a way off, but it was still nice to see. The next major exclusive announcement, this was a real shock. And because I'm such a big fan of From Software and their games, this one really hit me, as it did with many others. But you get this trailer that starts out with some landscape shots, and at the time you don't necessarily know it's a From Software game because they haven't said anything about who's making the game. And I didn't really catch on until I saw the little I can't remember what they call them in Elden Ring, but the bonfire equivalent of Elden Ring. Until you see that is when I really caught on, and it said about Bandai Namco and then From Software, and I'm thinking Elden Ring again? What are they doing here? And essentially, what they've announced is this game called Elden Ring Night Reign, which first things first, From Software's output in recent years. In fact, From Software's output going back the past decade has been insane, but especially within the past few years. Now, with this new standalone co-op survival action game, Elden Ring, yes, with this title, I can't believe that From Software has essentially, you could say unofficially because it's technically not officially one, but unofficially have basically created an Elden Ring trilogy inside 4 years with the base game, the major expansion that was Shadow of the Erd Tree, which came out this year, and now this co-op game that's coming out next year called Night Reign. The fact that they've managed to build out the Elden Ring game into a package of three like that, just has me borderline flabbergasted because the level of work. Elden Ring in itself is not a small game. So the fact that they've managed to branch out, and of course they're reusing assets and they're, building upon what they already established. But even so, for their workforce and their team to be hard at work and to craft all this within 4 years is extremely impressive to me, especially when you consider the fact that Armored Core came out last year as well. So they've really been hard at work. They've kind of gone on a run similar to what Insomniac's been on when they made like Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Ratchet and Clank, Spider-Man 2. It's a similar type run, arguably more impressive in my opinion. And as a FromSoft fan, I'm elated and I'm really excited for this game because when you look at the gameplay details that came out afterwards for what this game's actually going to be, it sounds really intriguing. And I see a few people that seem quite disappointed, a few fans that seem quite disappointed that it's more Elden Ring. But the way I look at it is this is something different for a start for the franchise and for FromSoft as a whole in terms of what this type of game actually is very different to what they've done before. So I think that's exciting in itself. And the other thing, which I think a lot of people are overlooking, is this isn't their next major title. I think that's why some people are disappointed because they're thinking, oh, I wanted them to make something new or a new sequel to something, but they just done more Elden Ring. FromSoft, it's been reported multiple times in recent months that FromSoft are actually working on multiple games currently. So, of course, this is a big deal, Elden Ring Night Reign, but this isn't the major player in their catalog that's being worked on at the moment. They are working on multiple projects, which means they are working on other titles, which may be other sequels or other new titles. So, with that in mind, this announcement of Elden Ring Night Reign, I take it with a lot of positivity because for me, it's just more Elden Ring, which is a good thing. And it's almost like not like an appetizer, but something to just hold you off some more, something to keep you busy and occupied and satisfied whilst we wait on those bigger, more standalone titles that are on the way. So, and like I said, because it's something new, this isn't just another expansion like Shadow of the Erd Tree, which in itself would still be impressive. this is actually a whole new game that looks like it's going to be competing alongside Monster Hunter and the upcoming Horizon multiplayer video game for that Monster Hunter-esque co-op online experience, which, as someone like myself, I know I've said I've wanted to get into Monster Hunter with Monster Hunter Worlds next year. But with this now, I think I might just hold off and I might just go full pelt into this Elden Ring Night Rain because the survival aspects of the game, I think what I read was there's like a 3 day and 3 night cycle in the game, and you've got to survive and level up throughout the day. And then when it gets to night, you fight the bosses, and the map shrinks as the days go on, which forces you to confront the bosses. And you've got specific classes. So I think there's like 8 pre-built classes, so you don't get to customize. There isn't a whole lot of build customization in this game. It's kind of predetermined, but you get to kind of chop and change between those as well. There's a lot more mobility changes, so you've got movement mechanics in this game and scaling walls and jumping that look like they're ripped straight out of Sekiro that are placed into this game. And then the other big thing from the trailer is you've got bosses that we fought in previous From Software games in this game. So you've got Lady Maria from Bloodborne in this trailer. You've got the Nameless King from Dark Souls 3 in this trailer, which is incredibly intriguing in terms of what are the lore implications for that. This is all cool being in this game because what this game essentially is an Elden Ring roguelike game by the sounds of it. And that sounds really fun. A co-op roguelike Elden Ring game. Sounds great. But on top of that, if they are going to tie this game into the lore of the lands between and Elden Ring and From Software games in general, what are the lore implications of having the Nameless King in this game and other characters and enemies from Software titles in this game? I'm really intrigued by that aspect of it because if you were to look at it in a very generic way, it looks like a From Software multiverse. Now, when you say it like that, that sounds like a horrible idea. But when you look at what that could really mean in terms of how they can implement it into the lore, and not in the sense of it being a literal multiverse, but something else going on there that's causing, bosses and characters from other games to collide, I'm really intrigued to see what FromSoft are going to do with it. So Elden Ring Night Rain, that had me going crazy yesterday. I couldn't believe my eyes, and I still kind of can't believe it. I'm very excited. Very happy with FromSoft's output. I think they're the goats. They're really, really great at what they do. I don't think anyone's doing it on the level they are, and that was just a genuine surprise to see that at the show last night. But I'm very happy with it. The next game that was shown meant a lot to me because Eco, however you want to say it, and Shadow of the Colossus especially, are games that really impacted me from a young age. Games that when I was younger and I laid eyes on those titles for the first time, it made me, even at that very young age, recognize that this medium of gaming is more than just entertainment on a base level, that it's actually a form of art. And Shadow of the Colossus, for the longest time, up until when Bloodborne came out, was my favorite video game of all time. And it's still in my top five. Still probably my second favorite video game of all time behind Bloodborne. And basically, the creator of The Last Guardian, Eco, and Shadow of the Colossus premiered a trailer for their next game. It's untitled, but I'm very intrigued by it because it shows a character that looks very similar to the, art direction that you would expect from those previous games. And he's climbing what looks to be like a mecha, but designed, with the visual aesthetic of a Colossi from Shadow of the Colossus, but it's just a mecha. And there's this kind of massive force field of I can't remember what they call it in the game, but there's basically like an imminent impact that's about to occur. And you see this character scale the mecha, climb on the head, and the head detaches and flies off as the rest of the body takes the impact. And it gave me like Neon Genesis Evangelion vibes, even though there's no like real substance within the what was shown in this trailer to link those two things, but just the way it was the emotion in the trailer, I think, and the kind of mecha visual and the character, and I think it was the music. The music was beautiful in this trailer, just like it is in all those previous games. And this game's probably a long, long way away. But I'm excited to see more of it, and I'll definitely be picking it up day one when it does come out. The next game that was shown was from the director of the game It Takes Two, which won Game of the Year a couple years ago. And there was another game he made. A Way Out, I believe it's called. Two co-op games that I've not actually played myself, but I've heard very good things about. This next game has really got my attention. It's called Split Fiction, and it's essentially about these two women who are basically creating these worlds, one within fantasy and one within sci-fi. I believe these stories that they're creating, and somehow through this machine, they end up falling into the worlds they've created. And I believe it's going to be a co-op adventure which you simultaneously playing in both worlds and navigating both worlds. And I'm assuming using what you're doing in both worlds to kind of complement each other throughout this journey. And I think the gameplay styles of the game itself will change and evolve depending on what you're doing in each world. And it looked like a very eccentric, exciting, bold vision for this type of game, and it really made me feel like, this is just a great vision for a game. Like, I'm very creative, and when I sometimes I think to myself, is gaming getting a little too stale, a little too one note in some areas? And in the grand scheme of things, no, but I think there is a bit of a repetitious nature in terms of some of the games we see nowadays, in terms of a lot of them being RPGs or coined an RPG, a lot of them being, either samurai games or games with sword play and stuff like that. Whereas you look at a game like this and you're like, this looks like a game in the best of ways, and it looks exciting and it looks fresh. And I'm very excited to see more of this game. And when it gets released, I will probably jump in and buy this game. And it makes me more intrigued to check out It Takes Two as well, and the previous game, A Way Out. Next, this is where I start to go a bit out of order because I can't remember the order these things happened. But we got a trailer from Capcom that, like, watching the trailer, it's like, what is this? And then all of a sudden, your eye catches onto like these red orb-like things that are floating in the sky, and I'm like, very DMC-like. And then you see this gauntlet absorb them, and I'm like, oh my God, Onimusha is returned, and that's crazy because I feel like in the past couple years, I've become more aware of Onimusha once again, and the fact that it was a dormant franchise from my childhood that I haven't seen since. It's been literally 2 decades. Like, the last Onimusha mainline title came out on the PS2. It's been that long. You have to be gaming from early to even know what Onimusha is. And the fact that it's coming back, Capcom's been on this resurgence ever since the Resident Evil 2 remake, where their RE engine's been updated to a really good standard, and pretty much most of the games they've released since then have been all bangers, and they all look good and they all play good and they've been impressive. And the Capcom of the late PS3, early PS4 generation is way in the rear view now, and they're now one of the top studios with a lot of consistency behind them for quality. And to see them bring Onimusha back, which is something I've wanted to see come back but never thought would come back, is extremely exciting. The game looks great. The level of detail is great in the game. The graphics, the gameplay looks great, and it looks like a good reinvention of what Onimusha is for a new generation and a new audience, as well as the old school fans. And I'm really excited. Now, fingers crossed, they've brought Onimusha back, which is one of the ones I thought they would never touch. Fingers crossed that Dino Crisis is next. That is probably one of my most anticipated unannounced titles ever. Dino Crisis. Capcom, please bring Dino Crisis back. Please. We deserve it. Next, after that, another shock. I see a game with like these kind of sci-fi elements in a jungle, these characters that have kind of got these kind of sci-fi, not suits on, but sci-fi kind of mods on their body, and they're hunting. And I'm like, okay, this kind of looks like Ark, that dinosaur game. Nope, it's Turok Origins, a new Turok game. Once again, it's been almost 2 decades. I think it's 2008 was the last Turok game. We've got a brand new one. Gameplay looks really crispy on this one, really smooth and really, really fun. Another game that I'm probably gonna buy day one. Another franchise that I didn't think was going to be coming back. It is coming back. Very exciting. Big, big shock. Those two, Onimusha and Turok, big shocks in this conference for me. Um, the end of the conference, in fact, no, I'll speak about that at the end of this video. After that, we had Outer Worlds 2, which was shown off. Now, the Outer Worlds is a game that I only got into like 4 or 5 months ago. Started playing it for the first time with the PS5 version. Really enjoyed it. Didn't finish it yet, but I was enjoying it. It reminded me of Fallout, but the good old days of Fallout. Obsidian, who made this game, they made Fallout New Vegas. And I never played Fallout New Vegas, but it has a lot of praise behind it. And through the Outer Worlds, I can kind of see why. I was really enjoying the style and the humor of that game. And Outer Worlds 2 just looks bigger and better, bolder. And it is officially coming to PS5. It was an Xbox exclusive prior to this, but with this trailer, they announced the PS5 version as well. I will be getting that game when it comes out if I finish the first one by then. Got the trailer for Borderlands 4. Now, the Borderlands 4 is a game, once again, that I'll probably buy on launch. But I gotta say, when it started, because when we got the tease for Borderlands 4 last year, oh sorry, earlier this year, it looked like it was gonna have a different style to it. And I'm sure one of the creators or devs mentioned that it's gonna have a different style and look different. And the start of this trailer, it did look quite different. It had like a realistic edge to the cell shaded animation, so it kind of looked partially like the classic Borderlands style, but with a more realistic edge to it. And I thought that style looked really, really nice actually. But then once the gameplay side of the trailer kicked in, the gameplay looked good. But visually, it looked very similar to what Borderlands looked like in the past. So I was kind of let down by the fact that they didn't fully commit to this new visual style because the elements at the beginning of the trailer and the way that kind of cinematic was presented was actually quite intriguing to me. But like I said, I'll probably still get Borderlands on day one. They showed a trailer for Mafia: The Old Country, which I think looks excellent. Like this looks, in terms of story-driven narrative games that have a real narrative focus. This looks like it could be of the upper echelon, especially for next year. That it could easily maybe fall into the Game of the Year nominations, especially because of its narrative. And that's something that the Mafia franchise is known for in this game with its cinematics and the story and the acting and the performances. It all looks like it's at a top standard, and I'm really excited to play this game. I just wish they showed a bit more gameplay in the footage. But either way, I think this is going to be a very promising title for summer next year. What else did they show? Steel Hunters, which is an online game, which I think at the moment is only on early access or entering early access on PC. But it looks like a huge like mecha battle royale, not a literal battle royale, but basically a mecha battle royale in the sense that you've got a bunch of mecha on this map fighting each other, different shapes and sizes. Looks like quite a frantic game in terms of its gameplay, but it looks very fun. It's definitely one I want to check out. So hopefully that does come to PS5. But that's called Steel Hunters. You then got shown off Dying Like the Beast, which is the standalone DLC for or standalone game coming after Dying Light 2. And the thing that really stood out to me with that is how good it looks. Now, I've played Dying Light 2 on the PS5 Pro, and it looks incredible. It looks like a PC game running on high settings, but this looks substantially better again. And the graphics on this trailer is really, really impressive. And it's the graphics alone that have me even more intrigued to try it out because it looked very real. The Dying Light trailer. What else did we have? We had the creators of the developers behind Yakuza had two announcements. One, which was another big shock, and another franchise where I thought, are we ever going to see this again? Virtual Fighter, a new one's on the way. What a shock. And then the next game they showed off is called Project Century, which at first looked like a Sleeping Dogs-esque type of game in terms of its gameplay. It's set in 1915 in Japan, I believe, and it has like martial arts combat with like knives and stuff like that, but it looks very detailed in terms of its animations and the gameplay itself, very sophisticated, and it looks really, really good. But I think this game is going to be a long, long way off because they don't even have an official title for it yet. So this is probably going to be a 2027, 2028 type of game, but it looks very impressive. I watched Secret Level the other day, which was Amazon's new show, if you haven't heard of it, with a bunch of shorts centered around different game titles. I only watched a few episodes. I watched the Warhammer 40K one, which was excellent. I watched the Sifu one, which was pretty good. And I watched the Pac-Man one, which was very strange. Not going to call it bad, but it was very strange because you watch it and you think, yeah, there's Pac-Man elements in this, but this is not Pac-Man. But it's like a reinvention of Pac-Man, like an interpretation of Pac-Man, which is kind of interesting because it was like a sci-fi kind of horror-esque take on Pac-Man. They announced a game called Shadow Labyrinth yesterday, which is that concept, which I find really interesting. So that secret level episode was essentially our introduction to this reinvention of Pac-Man through this new game called Shadow Labyrinth, where you're not actually playing as Pac-Man. You've got this character that's kind of like this lone wanderer who almost seems like a clone who is navigating this world, having to eat to evolve and survive. And you've got Puck, Puckman um, alongside him. So if you watch the secret level episode, you'll understand the context of which this game is kind of based around, which I find it quite interesting. Just the method in which they wanted to introduce that to us with the secret level episode first. But I am kind of intrigued by that game now. What else? Helldivers 2 got a big update. That was one of my favorite games of this year, Helldivers 2. Um, and I will be going back on it now. I haven't been back on it since like the top end of the year, but I will be going back on it now to kind of really soak up all the changes they've done over the past, 6, 7 months that I've not been playing. There's a new anime racing game called Screamer that they announced, which looks pretty cool. It kind of like a blend of like realistic-esque looking racing visuals with like anime designs, kind of like what Need for Speed Unbound did, but taking it even further. It kind of reminded me of the anime film Redline, which if you've never seen that, it's a really good anime film. They showed off the game The First Berserker, which they've shown before. That still looks great. There's a Game of Thrones game, which actually looks quite high production because I remember when the show first started, and there was a game that came out in 2011 for Game of Thrones, and it was very, very low budget. The show didn't pop off yet, so it wasn't given the attention that it deserved, and the game kind of floundered. And then there was the Telltale Games, which wasn't that great from what I remember. But now we've got like a bigger budget game. You've got Jon Snow in there. The character models look great. Gameplay looks like it could be good. So I'm intrigued to see how that goes along. Um, and that was pretty much it. And you get down to the last two announcements. Now, I'm just going to quickly check my list to make sure I haven't left anything off that I did want to speak about. No, yeah, that was pretty much it. And then the second last announcement was Okami 2, a sequel to Okami, which is a game that I've never played, but I've always been aware of since I was 10, 11, 12 years old when it came out. And the art style always stood out to me. I remember seeing about it in the PlayStation magazine. I remember seeing its rave reviews from back then. I think it won Game of the Year at the time. And yet, almost 20 years later, there's a sequel coming for that. Excellent. The final game, Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet. I believe that's the full name. I got it right. Naughty Dog's next title. It's a retro-futuristic bounty hunter in space style adventure game that, or action adventure game that graphically looks stunning, stylistically looks very, very inspired and very interesting. The soundtrack is done by the guys that did, I can't remember their names, but they recently did the score for Challengers and the score for the Mutant Mayhem Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film. They are people that were a part of Nine Inch Nails. They're doing the soundtrack. The soundtrack in this trailer, I don't know if that was part of their original score that they're making for this game, but I really love the music, the score that was in this trailer. And yeah, it's interesting to see Naughty Dog go in a new direction, a vastly different direction, which I think is what they needed to do. I think they've been stuck in that rut of The Last of Us for over a decade now, and I think it's good that they've branched out into something different for a breath of fresh air. It's going to be nice to see what Naughty Dog's capable of doing outside of that grim, realistic, real-world aesthetic of The Last of Us, which they also brought through to Uncharted 4 as well. So it's going to be nice to see them do something completely different. We don't know what the gameplay is going to be like, but apparently it's their most dynamic and dense kind of gameplay system they've ever created. But I like the idea of like a bounty hunter game that is inspired by Cowboy Bebop and Akira, which is what they said, and you can kind of see that influence when you watch the trailer. I'm intrigued by that style of game being made with this type of attention to detail and budget because that rarely happens. And as an anime fan and a fan of those two anime properties, that's very exciting to me. And it's Naughty Dog, of course, so of course it's going to be a big showpiece when it comes out. But that's my thoughts on the Game Awards overall. I was very impressed with it. Like I said, I think it's one of the best gaming showcases we've had in many a year. And I want to know your thoughts. Get in the comment section. What was the announcement that shocked you and surprised you? What are you most excited for? What are you sad that to not see that didn't show up that you wanted to see? Just let me know in the comment section. If you enjoyed this video, thanks for watching this long. Hit the like button, and if you're new here, subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. I have been playing my PS5 Pro a lot since launch. I still plan on doing a video review of that to kind of give you an update on my thoughts on using the PS5 Pro, and I will be doing a video shortly of my favorite games of the year as well. So stay tuned for that and subscribe for that. I'll speak to you guys in the next video.